Hello, everyone. We are here for the 75th podcast on this story. Yeah.
Sorry, I meant to make that sound exciting, and then I yawned in the middle of my woo. I was like, woo! And, yeah, sorry. I guess we can jump into some reviews.
Yeah, I got a few this time.
Last Robin. All right, the first time I get an on-time review, cracks knuckles. All right, buddy, prepare your dentures because I'm pretty sure
I don't have dentures.
You ran out of teeth after the New Year's special.
Oh.
If you aren't already regretting asking me to read and review, you may be now, and I'm here to leave big boiling buckets of boiling hot criticism all over your forthcoming chapters. Oh
awesome.
My goodness. The meme lord is back and ever ready to jump into the fray and do a little backstabbing and groin punching.
Come on, man.
Don't worry, you'll get a pat on the back and a thumbs up after. Okay, maybe more than that. We'll see. No promises. First off, nice to see Kirishima get a win, assuming you're not yanking the wool over our expertly honed eyes to break our hearts once again. Would not put it past you.
No, he went out on the date.
Okay.
Yeah, he had a good time. I didn't screw over. I wouldn't screw over Kirishima. Come on.
No, he's torturing his OC, man.
Yeah, that's what I'm about.
Yeah. It's nice to see the Lightning Drops debut, even if it was for a simple mission, which are often the most important. Group flying method is fun. Want to see more of that. All right, prep your mouth guard.
All right. Let's go.
When Kudai was scolding Mahoro, I kind of got a lot more Mataris vibes than Kudai. I get why it had to happen, but it was definitely a little harsh, especially since he's not their dad. But he's still young, so I'll chalk that up to age.
So real quick, I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but I did do the Myers-Briggs personality types test for these characters, and there's only one letter difference between Kudai and Mataris, and I thought there was more. I was wrong. Kudai's just like the introverted version of... He's like the introverted version of Mataris, basically.
Or more like Michael, since he's not totally off the handle like Mataris.
Like that speaks to... Myers-Briggs talks about personality quirks, not criminal history.
Yeah.
But so like they are different people, but there are still some elements of me that get put into both of them. So I guess that just came out a little bit. But I didn't think it was out of character.
All right. The story about the prank caller, I feel like, was reaching a little bit. I kind of felt a little between the realms of realistic and far-fetched, as seemingly the boy made several no 911 calls. I feel like at least someone should have shown up, at least to admonish him or check in, as 911 doesn't have a do not answer list, and there being plenty of heroes and police officers who could have shown up.
Yeah, so, I don't... My argument in that situation is that, like, there's not supposed to be a blacklist, but A, society has changed in ways that we can't fully understand at this point in the future, and B, I'm pretty sure it's certainly not supposed to happen, but I'm sure that somewhere out there there's places where it's just like...
It does in our town.
Oh, really?
There's not a do not answer list. They always have to answer. They are required to answer and report it to the authorities. But the problem is, if they have enough calls from a certain individual, they'll stop coming. So there was, like, for example, my grandparents were struggling with a family member who was homeless and camping in their yard.
And setting stuff on fire.
He would frequently set the yard on fire, and every time he did, they would call the police and, request that he was escorted off property. After it happened 10 or 12 times, people just stopped showing up. They'd call and they'd get, they'd put it into a report, but the authorities stopped showing up because they thought of it as, just a recurring family matter, and it wasn't on their priority list. So, personal experience, I've seen it happen, and I do know, some other people, at least in our town now. Not to say that's legal, it may not be.
But it definitely happens.
And yeah, corruption happens too. So it's I think more times than not, in more communities than not, people will, an officer will always show up in that kind of situation. But it actually is something realistic that does happen. All right, hostage situations have to be taken seriously. Yeah, like I said, and going with he's just lying again seems unrealistic.
We've offered our rebuttal for that.
And 911 operators are supposed to screen calls accordingly. I feel like something should have happened.
I mean, eventually someone went and checked it out, but
it wasn't on the priority.
Yeah.
So the thing is, that's the other thing is they'll have higher priority calls that are coming in, so sometimes it takes longer for a squad car to get out. Also, with the jump from a prank to being a pathological liar, there's not enough context or backstory to make the story relatable or believable. It just feels like an excuse to shoehorn Kudai to having a reason to be extra upset.
I can see the argument for that. Counter argument is that, I mean, he doesn't have he doesn't have the time or the inclination to go into a detailed account of how this kid went from prankster to pathological liar. You know, A and B happened, and then there was C.
Yeah, you may be basing this off a real event, but I and other readers would have no context and feel like just a random unnecessary dark moment scolding when it could have been used as an opportunity to educate a very young child and later leave the discipline to the parents.
I mean, he didn't discipline them. He decided not to. He had mercy on them.
Yeah,
like he put the fear of the law in them, which I think law enforcers should be allowed to do. But like he didn't scare them unnecessarily. I don't feel like. Maybe that's just me.
I think you're a very intense person, and the way you speak with children is very different from the way other people speak with children. Your intense dad voice is like psycho scary serial killer to most parents. Yeah. Your mom wants to cry when you use your dad voice, bro. We live in a culture where we baby talk kids till they're 18 and then wonder why they're psychopaths. Okay, sorry. That was totally random. But I'm not, so you have
So there's your context.
Yeah, you're a very intense personality, dude.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make sense to most people. So I could see why Kudai's response wouldn't make sense to a lot of people.
I was, the other day in the Discord, me and some of the other guys were making jokes about the Red Swordsman, and Amira hasn't read the Red Swordsman, so she didn't get it. We basically explained what Mataras was to her, and her response was like, "I don't see it happening." I was like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "You just seem too squishy." I was like, "Did you just call me fat?"
I did see that.
She's like, "No." She's like, "You seem too nice to be that kind of person." I'm like, "Oh boy."
Yeah, I don't know. You have a very intense personality, so it definitely rubs people the wrong way often, which is not a bad thing because you end up with like friends who can get past that. But no,
I make really good second impressions.
All right. Anyway, okay. Oh, speaking of, that's what Last Robin says. Anywho, I'll take my boots off now. You may remove the mouth guard. You may also want to invest in headgear. You may take your devices off airplane mode. Please remain seated while your seatbelt fast. Wait, sorry, that's a flight attendant spiel.
Wait, are you a flight attendant?
Ahem. Nice, lighthearted chapter. I look forward to seeing how you tackle the rest of the movie arc. I look forward to seeing Switch in action. Here's a little haiku. See you later, Maddie. Vaya con queso. Kirishima wins. Was that really realistic? Bring on the villains.
Bring on the villains I shall.
Solid haiku. I can't write haikus, but...
When I do, you just make fun of them.
Well, I think poetry's stupid. I'm that girl. Okay? I've never thought poetry was beautiful.
Which I did not learn until like 3 years into our dating relationship, and I thought I was being sweet.
Yeah, he kept writing.
Turns out I've been making an ass out of myself the whole time.
Yeah, he wrote me a lot of poetry, and he was cute, so I put up with it. But I think poetry.
One of the single most embarrassing moments of my life is learning that she hated it.
Sorry. Yeah. Anyway, thank you, Last
Robin.
Light Hero Kaiser. Most interesting, great chapter, mate. Can't wait for more. Kaito. I have a bad feeling about this Switch, and I've learned to trust my gut on things like this, like with the original work in progress hero.
Whip Hero.
Oh, Whip Hero. God, I hated him. Light. Yeah, he was an a-hole. Kaito. Wow, something we agree on. Light. Yeah, weird. Blade Hero Light, and now Hero Impact signing out.
Okay. I don't know anything about the I don't know. I only know a few things about Rising of the Shield Hero, so I'm guessing that there was a whip hero at some point, and they probably weren't a great person. But, all right.
Okay.
Let's see. Silver 4700, so I'm going to go ahead and take this one.
Cool. I'm losing my voice. You go for it.
All right. Maharo. We need you to come down here. There's a villain attack. Bakugo. Oh, sure. I bet it was hit by the mermaid mafia paid in leprechaun gold, but who's the puppet master? The unicorns? No, they've had a feud with the mermaids for years. Izuku. Dang it, Kachan, you can't just brush off a civilian calling for help. Bakugo. Yes, I can. Hikari. I mean, he's not wrong. Anyways, I really like the chapter. Into more specifics, it was interesting how you introduced the two kids for Heroes Rising. I have mixed feelings about them from the movie, but maybe I'll like them more here. It's also been a really hot minute since I've seen the actual film, so I might need to go back and refresh myself. Regardless, not only did I like the little interactions at the hero headquarters, not only with the townspeople pulling a Muppets Christmas Carol and bringing a bunch of food for the heroes, but also, didn't you just watch that with the kids?
I did. I don't care what anyone says. I know the Jim Carrey Christmas Carol is fantastic. I love the Muppets Christmas Carol. It is so fantastic. Sorry. Anyway.
No, you're good. You're good. I asked the question. Let's see. But also just with everyone's ideas for what constitutes an important job. But I also really like how you're finally going to be introducing the OG villain for the island. Yeah, I'm excited about that. And I thought, like, it was a good, like, way to fill up some space, but I also thought it was a really important distinction for the heroes to make. It's like, yeah, the people that are counting on you are important, but everything that they ask for isn't necessarily. So I just thought that was an important distinction that they should make for themselves before they get too much further along in their hero careers, and like keep that in mind going forward, because otherwise they're going to end up with burnout. Let's see. Izuku and Mina. You didn't need to go too hard on the kid, you know? Hikari. Allow me to open up my big book of sad and traumatic stories from either my past or my dad's job that perfectly applies to the situation. Pulls out a massive book that's larger than the Order of the Phoenix and Deathly Hallows combined. Dude!
That's hilarious.
Do you guys have an hour or so? It'll take me a bit to find the specific story. There's so many to go through. I mean, you're not wrong, but did you have to say it like that?
That was pretty funny.
That was pretty funny. In all seriousness, I do like how the situation was handled overall, but that doesn't mean I don't want to make fun of it.
Well, you have to.
Yeah.
That's the best part about fiction is you can't take it too seriously. Gotta be able to enjoy it and laugh about it.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Not a whole lot to say other than that. Again, I'm hyped for Switch. I don't know her character, and you said that this didn't apply to her in terms of her character and thought process, but since that one random villain monologue I wrote doesn't work, I will write a spontaneous villain monologue for her because I like writing those. Dang it. Have a wonderful day, Silver. Well, thank you for your review, dude.
All right. Thanks,
Always a delight.
Silver. All right. Joe Clone. This chapter at last gives us the introduction to Maharo and Katsuma, which is great. Kudai giving Maharo a scare was definitely not expected. The reasoning for it honestly felt a bit shoehorned, but it kind of works. Except, why didn't the family in Kudai's story use their quirks to defend themselves unless they did and still died?
I mean, I would assume that's what happened.
Yeah. Surely they have exceptions to the law on those grounds.
Yeah. If your life is in danger, you're allowed to use your quirk for self-defense. You know, if it's like not everybody can spam shockwaves from their hands and stuff. You know, some people, their quirk is literally they sneeze and flowers come up. Like, I don't know how that's going to help you against the villain.
So they're not necessarily combat oriented quirks.
Yeah.
But yeah. All right, I kind of missed the hologram part because only that gave Bakugo a chance to show off his cleverness in the movie. Without that, I'm sure he's still the same, but now Maharo isn't connected to him like in the movie, like the movie made it. Going into the next part, what's this gonna do to the kids?
Yeah, honestly, I tried to figure out a way to see if I could still work that scene in because I really like that scene for Bakugo, but I couldn't do it without, like, it just wouldn't make sense with, like, how could I handle the situation. There's no way Maharo's gonna try that again. She understands, like, this guy's not messing around. I'm not, so, like, no matter how much she dislikes them, she has the sense at this point not to mess with them.
It felt very much like when my fourth graders are being crazy, and I finally yell at them, and then I say, do that again and I'm gonna call your parents after school, and then they just like get all quiet and scared and then they do their work, which I rarely do that. But when I have to. And they get all scared. He basically did that. He's like, here's a traumatizing story. I can call your dad.
No, he didn't tell the kids the traumatizing story.
Okay.
He told his friends the traumatizing story because
Okay.
they were all being like these guys. They were like, why'd you do that? That was really mean. He was just like, let me open up my big book of sad stories.
All right. Yeah, so maybe, good to think about, though, that, like, somehow it didn't quite flow the way you used that reasoning.
That would have felt shoehorned to me if I still included that scene in. Because, like, at that point, there's no way Kurt-Eye doesn't be like, well, okay, I'm calling you dad, and then...
Yeah.
You know, that'll set off a whole nother series of events that I feel like would have detracted from the...
It's like, if a child files a false police call, parents should be informed either way. Like, I don't know why their dad wasn't called in the first place, but whatever.
Yeah. I feel like my reasoning made more sense for why he didn't call them in this story than in the original. Because in the original, Deku just lets them go. He lets the girl yell at him and then just like, okay, as long as the kid's okay, I'm fine. In my version, it's like he didn't call the dad because he felt bad for them. Like
Okay.
he was...
Either way, I think both situations are very, how do you say, irresponsible of the heroes. Because as a parent and as a person who is in charge of young people, you kind of have to talk to the parents about these things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, parents
I'm not arguing with what should have been done. I'm just making a defense for why I did what I did.
But it's like, I mean, even like in a real life situation, if a kid prank calls, 911, it can be prosecuted. It's prank calling 911 is prosecutable. And who gets prosecuted? Not the kid, the parent or guardian who's responsible for the kid.
Yep.
So, I mean, the dad should have been called either way. So that's my whole shtick. All right. Kirishima, I imagine, looks very nice for his date. Good luck, my guy. That is, if he's not interrupted by the villain attack. I jinxed it, didn't I? Crud muffins.
You did not jinx it. Kirishima had a very lovely evening.
Switch, huh? I expected at least one Nintendo joke, one Ginyu joke, or one SAO joke.
We'll see. We'll see about that. Thank you, Joe Clone, for your review.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everybody seems like they're kind of on board with the whole, like, Kurt-Eye roasting the kid.
I had the same response where it was like, that's very Mataris of him.
I didn't think it felt out of character for him.
No, this whole time, even if that is in his personality, he's been a much more gentle individual.
But everybody has their stressing point.
Yeah, I mean, you can argue that, but
everybody has something that'll trigger them.
But I think it might be good to think about, like, when you're designing an original character, there have to be places where you have to force yourself to make them do something that doesn't necessarily align with what you would do in the situation.
I have been trying to work on that and some other stuff.
Okay. All right. So, thank you. I think I said it. Thank you, Joe Clone.
Yep.
All right. Silly Kita. That opening went in a very different direction than I had assumed it would, largely for two reasons. One, I had assumed that even if Kudai is involved in finding Katsuma instead of the original lineup, they would still take Jiro along due to her sensory abilities. But I suppose Yaoyorozu was feeling a little nicer than Ida, letting our Team Lightning Drop go out on their first official job. And they got the job done, so all's well that ends well.
Yeah.
Second was Kudai's attitude toward Mahoro. I mean, given the context that he laid out, his reaction to her shenanigans made sense, though I feel as though a simpler explanation of him just being a cop's kid would have accomplished the explanation of why he hated prank callers. But I didn't actually expect him to be so scary. Maybe scary is the wrong word, but after seeing how he interacts with Eri, who I believe is similar to Katsuma, I believed him to be a lot gentler even if he was reprimanding Mahoro. It's not that it seemed out of character for him, I just didn't expect it. His reasoning for letting them go, relating to the plan or losing a parent,
relating to the pain of losing
a parent, felt a lot more like what I could expect from him, and shows his ability to empathize with others has come along since the story first began. Do you have anything to address?
No. Okay, yeah.
Next up, Kudai's interactions with everyone before dinner arrived was stellar. I loved how his friends are so accommodating to him, needing to do his repairs on his arm with Yairozu, even going so far as to supply him with the materials he needs so he doesn't have to wait to do his maintenance. To contrast, Kaminari is just putting his arm aside because he wanted food, was very much in line with dating advice for Deku.
The behavior.
With the behavior of a high school. Sorry. You know what? I'm going to let you finish this one because my eyes are really fatigued.
No worries. All right. With the behavior of a high school boy, and it made me laugh. And you kept the laughs coming with how Kudai was giving some not so subtle dating advice to Deku and how he voluntold Bakugo that he was taking night watch. Yeah, that was fun. Red Riot goes on a date. I low-key wanted to see how that went, but I guess it probably would have taken away from the other stuff that was going on that evening. Side note, giant red flag for Kudai's death in this chapter. That little talk that he had with Mina when they went out for a walk. I'm surprised he didn't mention there being cosmos or licorice flowers in the field around them. For those who don't understand that reference, a lot of anime and manga feature those flowers when someone's about to die. Kai is about to die. I firmly believe that. If he doesn't die in a battle against 9, I'll eat my Stetson.
Oh, see, be careful about this promise because we have a friend who once promised he'd eat his shirt. He lost the bet.
And I made him eat his shirt.
Yeah, it was pretty rough, man.
Yep. And you know what, though? He was a good sport. He actually ate the whole thing.
Did he eat the whole thing?
He ate the whole thing.
Lord, I thought he only ate part of it.
Nope, he took a break there for a minute, like halfway into it, and then he finished it.
Ugh, I think I had to look away after a while. Didn't he get out a fork and a knife and start adding ketchup to it or something?
Yeah.
Oh, my
well, that was the only way he could get it down because otherwise it would just get stuck in his mouth.
Please don't eat your Stetson. I don't want you going to the hospital. Ugh. Now this guy.
Please don't do that, dude.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Okay. Sorry. Continue.
Let's see. His and Deku's talk with Katsumo was also a red flag, at least for me. In the original movie, I really liked the dynamics between the two boys, and while that is certainly still present in this story, I got more of a passing on the torch vibe from Kudai's involvement in the conversation. So, Deku and Kai are headed out to the harbor together. Will we get a Deku, Kai, and Ground Zero fight against 9 already? I doubt that such an encounter would be the battle that kills our hero, since we have a little ways to go before the real boss fight. I do have to wonder about this Switch villain. Clearly you brought her in as a counterbalance for Team Ruby, but I'm very curious as to what kind of power you've come up with to counter a team as accomplished as theirs. Can't wait to see what happens next. We're about to hit chapter 75, so I get the feeling that something big is going to happen. Maybe Kai will die next chapter. Dang it, I'm going around in circles again. P.S. Please don't make me eat my Stetson.
Oh, man. That was beautiful.
Oh man.
All right. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you very much for your reviews. We had a lot of good length ones this time.
Yeah. Well, and they were solid feedback, and they were all really consistent with each other, which I think is very good.
Yeah.
Because I think it's so important when being creative. Because again, artists will always. A piece of them is always going into their artwork, but
which makes it impossible to be objective about it when you're looking at it.
It's important to push those boundaries by learning to really write someone who's going to make different choices than you and going to have different values than you.
Yeah.
And so I think that's super clear here.
Yeah. But all right, we'll go ahead and let the audio chapter play out and buckle in because this is going to be a long one. Was it Kira who just said it? This is entry number 75, so we're buckling in for a long one here. Be back in a bit.
From the moment I reached the other side, I could not hide from the great divide. I can't turn back time, I'm a soul what's mine. Get back what I lost, no matter the cost. Is there no way home? Is there no way home?
Scant Mercies. The masked villain who called himself 9 looked down from the ruins of the ferry that he and his crew had used to travel to Nabu Island.
his eyes glowing as he sought the power he needed. After a moment, he let out a long breath and said,
It's not in this area. Chimera, take out communications. Mummy, Switch, Slice, you're my diversions. I don't want to be disturbed.
How do you want us to do it? Asked the hulking blue-furred monster known as Chimera.
However you want.
Excellent. Mummy grinned from behind the red bandages that covered his face and the majority of his body. Dibs on law enforcement. Switch added, her eyes glowing purple. The moment they were all gone, the woman known as Slice slung her lengthy red hair around herself, unleashing a storm of diamond-hard scarlet needles in every direction. Within seconds, every ship that could get people off the island was completely wrecked, making escape for the residents impossible. Once Chimera takes out their communications, it will be impossible for them to call for help, she thought with satisfaction. And with no heroes to help them, the people of this island will have no choice but to submit to Nine's will. Can't Stop Twinkling, Invisible Girl, and Mirtanaster had just finished helping a couple of tourists find their luggage when they heard something that sounded an awful lot like an explosion coming from outside. Oh, you've got to be kidding me, the regal heroine groaned as they dashed out the door into the scene of mayhem and panic. Heroes! Shouted someone, they weren't sure who, as the civilians all ran away from the source of the chaos. It's a villain! Help us! The street was littered with monsters of all kinds wrapped in dark red bandages that reminded the young heroes of drying blood. They were all menacing figures, and they were tearing through the shopping center without discrimination, simply laying waste to whatever was within their reach. Seeing the disorder got Mirtanaster's hackles up enough that she let out a very unladylike growl before drawing her rapier. Aoyama, take out the ones that are floating, she ordered. I'll get the ones on the ground and keep them from getting to use too. Hagakure, call the office in case we need backup. I can't, I already tried, the other girl said, sounding close to panicked. I don't have a signal. Meanwhile, the mummified monsters were drawing closer, and the heroes knew that there was no time to waste bemoaning what they lacked. Get any stragglers out of here, then, Mirtanaster ordered as she began to conjure a trio of white hexes. There may be more of them. Tja! Her sword lashed out at blinding speed and reduced the closest mummy to scarlet ribbons, followed immediately by her leaping from hex to hex and slashing through another 4 mummies while she did. While Invisible Girl ran off to do as she was told, Can't Stop Twinkling was letting loose with his navel laser at anything that moved over his comrade's head. The two heroes soon noticed that whenever they defeated a monster, the bandages came unraveled around an object and deposited on the ground, broken. There were vending machines, street signs, food stalls, even a car was being used against them. Well now, this is a surprise. A new voice came into their midst as the mummies all drew back, allowing the teenagers to see that each one was tethered to someone. That someone was wrapped in the same bindings as the objects that had been turned into monsters that attacked them, and was now slowly walking toward the two of them. Heroes out in the middle of nowhere. Who are you? Mirtanaster demanded as she whirled her rapier and prepared a black hex behind her and a silver one in front of her peer. Why are you here? I'm not here to talk, I can tell you that. The man sneered from behind his bandages. His eyes were just about the only identifying feature they could make out, as the rest of him was covered in some kind of military-looking gear on the red fabric that was apparently using to control the loose objects in the shopping center. I also didn't expect to have anybody fight back, so this is turning into a fun day. He added as more bandages shot away from his body, wrapped themselves around a movie rental machine, turning it into a lumbering brute that shuffled toward the heroes. I suppose we're doing this the hard way, Mirtanaster muttered before activating her hexes, the black one sending her rocketing forward with her sword outstretched, and the silver sigil absorbing Can't Stop Twinkling's navel laser before spitting it out as a storm of razor-sharp light needles that skewered half the monsters, reducing them to scrap while the white-haired girl spun around the corner of a bakery and allowed them to pass her by. This was followed by her using some white hexes to run up the building and then leap out into open air, the point of her rapier aimed to deliver a swift blow to the villain controlling the puppets. Firecracker cocked her gauntlets, her hips squared and her fists up as she stared down at the woman who had nearly killed the police officer stationed at the precinct. Crescent Rose had her scythe unfolded and had her finger on the trigger, ready to leap into action at the first sign of trouble from their new enemy. The villain was short like Crescent Rose, with angular facial features accented by raven hair and violet eyes that flicked back and forth between the two sisters rapidly, while their owner fixed her lips in a sneer. I hate the cute ones, she growled softly. I think I'll mess up your faces after I kill you so no one will look at you at your funerals. Her appearance spoke nothing about her quirks, so the Americans were on high alert as they waited for their opponent to make the first move. Oh great, a crazy one, Firecracker grumbled. I hate the crazy ones. The only thing that's crazy is how fast I'm going to leave you a bleeding mess on the sidewalk. The villain that called herself Switch replied as her sneer turned into a demented smile while she clenched her fists, which were decorated with spiked knuckle dusters. The best part? You'll have made it happen yourselves. Bang! Froppy, get these people out of here! Tailman shouted as he charged at the beast-like villain who had appeared amid the rumbling earth that had set fire to the forest bordering the beach he and the others had been patrolling. Ribbit! Even as the martial arts hero ran at the unexpected enemy, Tentacle moved alongside their frog-like classmate to secure the other citizens who were closer to the danger zone, leaving their friend free to engage without having to multitask. Leaping high and spinning himself rapidly to build momentum, Tailman lashed out with his namesake's appendage the second that he came into the striking range with enough force to break bones, aiming for the burly villain's thick neck. He didn't actually expect to seriously injure the other man, given his hardy appearance, but he didn't expect for his blow to essentially be backhanded like a lazy fly, sending him backpedaling and off balance. He swiftly recovered his center of gravity and beat a hasty retreat a few yards away from the new threat, who regarded him with something like a bored curiosity. Realizing that he lacked the strength necessary to drive the beast back with conventional methods, Tailman decided to try and buy time for the evacuation in a different manner. "Who are you?" he demanded of the villain. "Why are you doing this?" The beast villain snorted as he casually picked up 2 boulders, each one larger than the martial artist, while he replied, "You look a little young to be a hero." So saying, he tossed the rocks like one would toss a softball, only these moved much, much faster in spite of their mass. Tailman was nearly flattened by the huge stones, but a blur of dark motion swept him away and sent him down safely a few dozen meters away from the danger zone. "Tokoyami?" he realized as he felt his feet touch the sand. "I've got this!" The jet black hero shouted over his shoulder as he flew toward the beastly menace. "Dark Shadow!" The creature born of his body let out a throaty battle cry as it stretched away from his cloaked frame and extended its claws, ready to tear into Tsukuyomi's enemy. Still, the raw power of his quirk was driven back, though it took a bunched fist as opposed to a casual slap this time. Even so, it was clear that Dark Shadow's strength would not do much more than annoy their enemy under the current conditions. If it were nighttime, it might be another matter for Tsukuyomi's chances of victory, but as things stood... "Tokoyami, get to the office!" Tailman shouted as he moved to re-engage the enemy, who still looked relatively bored with the lot of them. "We need reinforcements." "Are you sure?" he asked his classmate. "Go! Now!" Dark Shadow protested angrily. "We're not running from this guy. We stand our ground!" Suddenly, Tsukuyomi was glad that it was not nightfall. Otherwise, he might have lost control of his quirk then and there. "Dark Shadow, we are not Kai!" He shouted at the dark being as he tried to rein it in, having recognized the catchphrase it was using. "We cannot save people the same way he does. Ojiro's right. We need help to take this villain down." "Ah!" the creature protested, but it finally obeyed his command. "You get off easy for now, monster. When we come back, you're going to be the one flat under a rock." With that, the pair took to the sky, heading straight for the UA Hero Agency. "Ha!" the beast villain chortled. "The only one who could have pulled that off was All Might, and last I checked, he's not much of a hero these days." Tailman and Tentacle's faces both tightened with angry glares at that. "We may not be the symbol of peace," the multi-armed boy muttered, "but we're not heroes to take lightly either." Tailman finished as they ran back into the fray. Odds of success be damned. Back at UA Hero Agency, all of the students were starting to notice the lack of phone calls coming in, which led to the realizing that none of them had a signal in their office or cell phones. "Anyone else starting to get a bad feeling?" Mina asked nervously. Most of the students were at the agency, having completed their earlier jobs, and without any new requests to act on, they had decided to remain on the office on standby. Before anyone could answer her, they heard someone shouting out for help outside, which saw to them all running out the front door. "Heroes!" called a man who had just leaped off his moped. "There's a villain at the shopping district. Your people are holding him off, but they need help." "Trouble at the beach," called the deep voice of Tokoyami from above, startling his classmates. "A villain has appeared. Ojiro and Shoji are holding him back, and Asui has begun evacuating the citizens, but they all need help." Before Ida could start giving orders, another islander ran up, out of breath and gasping, "Villain! At the police precinct!" "Geez, how many of these guys just decided to invade all of a sudden?" Sero demanded of no one in particular. "It doesn't matter," the class representative answered as he turned to face his peers. "We're fighting on multiple fronts. This will be a race against time." "We're the only heroes on the island," Yairozu reminded them. "Communications seem to be down, so we can't expect any backup to bail us out if something goes wrong." "Bakugo, Kaminari, Kirishima, go to the shopping district and help Shini's team," Ida said rapidly, having apparently come up with the general plan. "Uraraka and Koda, you'll be our evacuation team for the beach. Yairozu and Jiro, you're on first aid for the shopping district teams. Ashido and Belladonna, head for the police station. Todoroki, Sero, Sato, and Tokoyami, we're all headed down to the beach. As most of the other heroes headed out to follow their orders, Ida took a moment to pull Ashido aside and say, knowing Kurai, he is probably at the police station. Whether he realizes it or not, his first instinct is to help protect other law enforcement officers in order to maintain some measure of organization, especially after the chaos that he's witnessed in Fukuoka. Mina's eyes widened for a second before she smiled at the taller boy and saying, thanks, class rep. Thank me by making sure he's all right. No signal, Izuku cried as he looked down at his phone and Kurai tapped his scouter in frustration. Nothing on my end either, he told his friend with a grim face. Whoever took out the harbor must be responsible for our comms going down too. If they're going through the trouble of cutting off our contact with the mainland, these aren't just some punks out for a joyride. We're looking at somebody who knows how to strategize. The two of them quickly made their way down to the harbor, but other than the ruined boats and piers, they saw no signs of whoever had done this. Check this out, Kurai said as he plucked something bright red out of the ground in front of them. Upon closer inspection, it looked like a crystallized needle, and it was sharp enough to penetrate metal and concrete. So at least one of them has a projectile-type quirk. You think there's more than one villain too? Izuku asked him. Given how recently our phones lost their signal and when Maharo made the call, when this had to have happened, I doubt we're dealing with an individual. Kurai answered with a shake of his head. There's got to be at least two of them on the island. I agree, his friend nodded. We need to make sure that the islanders are safe, however many of these villains there are. A thought seemed to occur to him just then because he looked directly at Kurai and said, Katsuma and Maharo, their dad is away at work. Kurai understood his sense of alarm. Without their father around, the two kids were more likely to panic and get lost in the chaos that was no doubt coming to their home. Do you know where they live? He asked his friend. They gotta be near Mrs. Suzumura's place, Izuku answered with a sharp nod. I'll go find and take them back to the office. All right, I'm headed for the police station. Kurai nodded as he started to jog away. Why there? They took out our means of escaping communications, Kurai called over his shoulder. Next logical place for them to hit would be law enforcement, so the panic keeps going. Since the island's hero retired only recently, the villains probably wouldn't be expecting a replacement agency just yet. Good thing we're here, then, Izuku shouted as his friend shot him a grim smile before using his quirk to take off at high speed. Can't stop twinkling and hit his limit with his quirk, kneeling over in pain after blasting another puppet in a string that seemed never-ending. Mirtanaster was still going strong, but it was hard for her to fight off so many of the manifestations at once, and she was slowly being driven back by the mummy villain. Just when it seemed as though their enemy would entrap her, there was a sound of explosions that ripped through half the scarlet puppets and blinded the villain simultaneously. Mirtanaster looked over her shoulder, knowing there was only one person who could make those kinds of blasts with such precision. You're late, she said as a familiar blonde walked through the smoke with a sneer on his face. I shouldn't have to be here at all, Ground Zero shot back. I thought you were supposed to be hot stuff, Ice Queen, but you can't handle one stupid villain. Maybe you'd care to show a girl how it's done, she said challengingly, which got the boy to smiling dangerously. All right, but remember that you asked for it! Ground Zero took to the air, even as Red Riot and Charge Bolt dove into the fray, laying waste to several of the puppets who were menacing Can't Stop Twinkling. Just behind them were Creati and Earphone Jack, who were prepared to administer first aid. Reinforcements, huh? Mummy muttered as he set out a bit more of his wrappings to summon more puppets to his aid. Let's change things up a bit. Without warning, he sent multiple lines of fabric toward his enemies, ensnaring Red Riot almost instantly, having seen that he was one of the slower fighters on the hero's side. Before the bandages could spread too far, Mirtanaster slashed through the line, attaching her peer to the villain, which in turn undid the bindings on his arm. Thanks, he said appreciatively. Guess I owe you one, Shnee. The two of them were startled by Ground Zero's shout of surprise, looking up just in time to see the boy become completely enshrouded in the red wrappings of their enemy. What the hell? He can control people too, Charge Bolt yelped. Not quite, Mummy answered as he continued to summon more puppets. Objects wrapped in my bandages move according to my will. Even if it doesn't work on people, there's a lot of your body that's covered by much that is inanimate. Clothes and gear are easily bent to my will, like I've done with your friend here. So now the question becomes, will you surrender and willingly become my puppets, or will I have to kill you and use your corpses against your friends? Mirtanaster had a different idea. Jack, see if you can imbalance our friend there, she said as she slashed through another puppet coming at her while avoiding Ground Zero in puppet form. You got it, the hearing heroine said as she knelt in front of her comrade and slammed her hands down on the ground, palms up. Heartbeat distortion! Her attack tore up the ground beneath the villain, knocking him off his feet with a shout of surprise. Charge Bolt, fry him! You got it! One of the boy's polarizing discs shot out of his wrist slinger and landed on the recovering mummy, who looked down at his chest with confusion. A second later, all trains of thought were scrambled by a sharp burst of electricity that knocked him on his back again, freeing Ground Zero and most of the other puppets. "Last move's mine!" the volatile hero roared as he shot straight toward the man who had trapped him. He grabbed the man by the face while the other hand primed the pin on the attached gauntlet. "Guess what happens when I get a little of my sweat stored up?" he asked the semi-conscious villain with a slightly deranged smile. "You get a maximum blast. Now die!" He yanked the pin out of its place and unleashed a hellfire explosion at point-blank range, thoroughly roasting the villain and knocking him through the wall of a concrete fence that surrounded a small parking lot. He was breathing heavily as he heard his classmates running up behind him, followed by Mirtanaster asking him, "Are you okay?" Mummy was lying in a smoking heap across the lot, unconscious and totally incapable of causing any more trouble for them. "Yeah, I'm fine," he snorted as if it were obvious. He did, however, look at her out of the corner of his eye and say, "You act fast, Schnee. Even Deku would have taken a while to come up with that plan." He saw the girl's eyes starting to light up, so he turned away and said, "I'm leaving the rescuing to you guys." "Where are you going?" Red Riot asked as Ground Zero got ready to take to the air again. "To kill the other villains!" So far, Crescent Rose and Firecracker were having a terrible time at fighting Switch, mostly because no matter what they did, they couldn't seem to hit her. "Is that all you pretty girls can do?" she taunted as she ducked behind a police car that Firecracker turned into scrap with a single blow. The rest of the block looked just as bad, having been torn up throughout the course of the fight. "Ah!" The sunny heroine snarled, infuriated at her inability to even land one shot on the violet-eyed villain. "What's her deal, sis? This should be a cakewalk. She's not that fast." "Best guess is her quirk is something like Blake's shadow," her sister replied as she unloaded an armor-piercing bullet into the disconnected door of a squad car that had been sent flying by one of Firecracker's earlier attacks. At close range, the round went clear through the metal, but still missed its intended target. "We're only hitting her where she's been, not where she actually is." "So at least you got some brains behind that stupid cute little face of yours," Switch said as she popped up behind the door, though her opponents couldn't tell if she was annoyed or impressed by the fact. Firecracker stopped caring even a little bit, when Switch added offhandedly, "Your blonde friend's just stupid, though, unlike the others. Makes me want to vomit when the dumb ones don't get the looks to match their insides. Come here and I'll show you who's stupid!" Firecracker shouted as she launched herself forward in tandem with her sister, both of them coming from opposite directions. Crescent Rose had her scythe held back in preparation of a mighty sweeping blow that would cut Switch in half, or at the very least remove a limb if it connected. Both sisters had their eyes peeled for any sign of when their enemy's quirk came into action, some tell that would alert them to Switch's next move, but it never came. Instead, they found themselves suddenly on a collision course with a large piece of rubble that hadn't been there a second ago, and only their lightning-fast reflexes kept them from crashing into the rock and each other. Both sisters leaped away from the chunk of concrete and put their backs to each other as they kept an eye out for their elusive foe, who seemed to have disappeared for the moment. "So that's it," Crescent Rose muttered. "What's happening?" Despite Switch's disappearing act, Firecracker was sure that the villain was somewhere close by, waiting to pounce. "She has a warp-type quirk," the younger girl said grimly. "She's not opening portals, though. She's changing places with whatever she wants to use as a shield so that it takes the hit and wears us out, little by little." "Can't you use your quirk to overwhelm her before she uses it?" "Too risky. If I try to hit her at top speed and she still gets the drop on me, I could end up flattened against a car or something." "What if—" Surprise! Too late, the girls realized the boulder next to them had been replaced by their enemy, and now she was aiming a vicious punch at Firecracker, who wasn't quite fast enough to dodge at such a close range. Fortunately, they had someone else watching out for them that day. A blast of light flew from up the road and crashed into Switch, sending her flying with a pained cry, while Crescent Rose and Firecracker made another hasty retreat away from their opponent. Both of them were filled with relief as they heard a familiar voice ask, "You two okay?" "A lot better now that you're here." Firecracker grinned as Kai stood beside the two of them. "You're a sight for sore eyes, handsome. You're lucky my girlfriend doesn't catch you calling me that." "Oh, really?" asked another familiar voice that drew the hero's attention. "I don't mind her calling you that. It's true, after all. I know you aren't going anywhere." Acid Queen was standing with a big smile on her face next to Gamble Shroud, who wore a more severe expression. "Glad to see you're okay, sweetie." "Likewise, but we're not out of the woods yet," he said as he turned back to look at the recovering Switch. "All right, Rose, what's the deal with this one?" In response, Crescent Rose gave a fast-paced summary of what she knew about their opponent's abilities, which led him to ask, "Can she trade places with anything, or is there some kind of limitation?" "I think she has to see an object before she makes the switch," the younger girl answered. "She's only been doing it with stuff that's out in the open, as far as I can tell." "So we need to either blind her or obstruct her field of vision so that she can't use her powers," Gamble Shroud muttered as she drew her sword. "I'm going to recommend you ladies go melee on this one. Kai mused as he studied their enemy, who seemed to be doing the same to their reinforcements. We don't need her switching places with a bullet. What about that blast you hit her with? She literally didn't see it coming. Nice! Firecracker gave him a high five while Switch began to advance on them again, now muttering something unintelligible under her breath, through ground teeth. Oh, one last side note, she seems to have something against hot girls. Oh, that's a lot of hate she's going to be throwing around here. Kai muttered as he settled into a fighting stance while activating his sword. Hey, Ashley Queen said as she got into her own ready stance. What are you saying, mister? Not the time, Mina. Oh, so you're one of those. Switch seethed, all of her wrath now seemingly focused on Kai, who was admittedly a little unsettled by it. Just because you're so gifted and desirable, you surround yourself with pretty girls, huh? I bet you ignore all the plain-looking ones no matter what their hidden potential might be, don't you? Kurt-Eye blinked a couple of times before he raised an eyebrow and asked, What, no one invited you to prom, so now you play dress-up and run around with all the cool kids after mom and dad go to bed? The villain went an unhealthy shade of red-purple in her face as her rage built itself up, but before she could make a retort, Acid Queen was already on the move. Acid shot! Gray-green liquid sprayed out of her fingertips, corrosive enough to cause serious blisters and chemical burns if they came into contact with another person's skin, but not enough to kill them unless they were somehow ingested. Switch dodged this by trading places with a nearby streetlight, which began to topple over as it had been taken from its foundation. Before she could rest easy, however, Crescent Rose and Kai were already upon her, their quirks enabling them to cross the distance at high speed and swing their weapons mightily with the hopes of bringing her down before she could pull another stunt. They still weren't quite fast enough to keep her from trading places with a tree that soon ended up in 3 pieces following their coordinated attack. Even so, Gamble Shroud's keen eyes had already spotted their adversary, and now she moved to engage. Shadow clones! She shouted as she advanced, 5 mirage images shifting into being around her, making it impossible to tell which one of them the real one was. They attacked in pairs, each time coming from a different direction as Switch continued to use her surroundings to her advantage, and she showed no signs of exhausting her quirk anytime soon. She was also starting to hit back, viciously, tearing through the clones with her knuckle dusters. Unseen by her, a Gamble Shroud had exited the melee as soon as Switch started to strike at her clones, and now Kai made another move. Rasen Shuriken! He bellowed as he hurled a swirling orb decorated with 4 sharp blades of light that would annihilate the surrounding area of wherever it struck, and it was headed right for the villain. His throat was glowing bright blue, indicating that he had engaged the power of his Vishuddha chakra, which meant that while he no longer had his superhuman strength and speed, he had a far more perfect control over his energy projections. This decision confused the others, leading Acid Queen to ask, What are you doing? I thought you said the close quarters was the way to go. Yeah, then I got another idea, Kai said as the whirling energy neared its target. Get ready to move, because this is going to be a big one. Just as he thought, Switch used her quirk to ditch her entanglement with the last of the clones as soon as she realized a new danger was coming toward her. Having noticed that she had a tendency to teleport behind the source of incoming attacks, Kai stretched out his hand and willed the energy to return to him, yanking it onto a path to put it on another collision course with his enemy. Nice try, Switch cackled as she started to run toward Kai, a maniac gleam in her violet eyes. If you're thinking about doing kamikaze, forget it, he told her before shouting, Shield! A wall of energon appeared between the two of them, solid enough to mostly protect him from any blast damage that would result from Switch getting hit in close proximity to him. Gotcha! Switch's crazed declaration caused a pit to form in Kai's stomach as he realized he must have made some kind of crucial error in the heat of the fight. Before he knew it, his shield had been replaced by the Rasen Shuriken, and there was no way he was going to dodge in time to avoid getting roasted with his own power. Fortunately, Crescent Rose was still close enough to sweep into her petals and speed him out of harm's way. Thanks, he gasped as the energy crashed into the police precinct and promptly blasted it to dust, much to his horror. Please tell me no one was in there. Don't worry, the cops were all gone before you showed up, the younger girl answered as she skidded to a stop while Gamble Shroud, Acid Queen, and Firecracker all closed in, trying to overwhelm their opponent with close quarters combat without much success. So, you saw that? She can switch objects with one another, not just herself, Kai said heavily. And it works on projectiles from other people's quirks. Yeah, I got that. Good thing we stopped using bullets then, Crescent Rose said with a wince. We probably would have ended up shooting each other. This chick is really starting to piss me off, he growled. I got an idea, his friend said, her silver eyes brightening. What's that? How did you beat that Nomu that could phase out of the way of your attacks? I cut off his ability to cast a shadow, which he needed to flee, he answered rapidly, his mechanical fist clenching as he saw Acid Queen get a nasty cut on her arm from a swipe of Switch's weapons. So use that same move on her to blind her so she can't teleport. Are you crazy? Kai gaped at his friend. The last time I did that, I blew a hole in the stratosphere. If I do that down here, the whole island is getting wiped off the map, not to mention all of you. So just do it on a smaller scale. I can't risk killing... Kai paused, an idea coming to him. On second thought, what do you need? Get me in close to her, keep the others back. Try to keep her field of vision obscured with all your petals until you see a bright light. After the big boom, get me to a medic, he said with a grimace. This is going to hurt both parties quite a bit, even if it works. Good luck, Kai, Crescent Rose said with a worried look right before she took him on into the red petals once again. Less than a second later, he was standing in front of Switch once more, delivering a swift punch at her jaw that he knew would never land. Sure enough, she changed places with a police bike that went flying from the force of the push. But it didn't put much distance between them. Plus, there weren't many other sizable objects for her to change places with. And before she could find one further away, Kai was ready to put his plan into motion. All of you, scatter! Kai shouted as Crescent Rose continued on with her task, entrapping the two fighters within a swirling storm of red flakes that left only a few rapidly moving gaps to see through, though none of them remained in place for long. The girls didn't bother to question the order and did as they were told, leaping away as he added, "True speech." Switch hesitated, wondering what was about to happen, and it cost her. Energy pulsed from Kai's body as he made a sweeping motion with his arms and roared, "Barrier!" His voice spoke the word into being, conjuring a brilliant dome shield made out of pure energy that entrapped both of them and blinding them simultaneously. "What are you doing?" she shouted as she tried to switch places with the shield itself, but finding herself unable to do so. "What is this?" "You can't look directly at a bright light without impairing your vision," Kai answered from within the swirling storm of energy. "So I took a gamble that you need to be able to have a clear line of sight to whatever you're changing places with. Looks like I was right." "Okay, so what?" the woman snarled as she started to advance on him. "You're trapped in here with me." "Not quite," he said with a smile, even though he knew she couldn't see it. "I think it's more accurate to say that you're trapped in here with me. And my little friend." "Huh?" "True speech. Bomb." An orb the size of Kai's fist appeared between his palms, and in spite of herself, Switch felt the blood draining out of her face. "You wouldn't," she protested. "Don't worry, this won't kill us," he chuckled through a grimace. "It ain't gonna tickle, though." With that, he hurled the bomb at the ground, ignoring Switch's scream of protest. The two of them were completely lost to sight and sound amidst the thunderous explosion that made Acid Queen shout in fear of her boyfriend's life. But it didn't last long. The light faded, allowing them to see their enemy and their friend lying on the scorched pavement, both of them covered in injuries, but clearly alive if the pained groans were anything to go by. "And here I was lecturing her about kamikaze attacks." Kai grunted as he slowly got to his feet, apparently in slightly better shape than his opponent. He nearly fell over, but Acid Queen was quick to move in and hold him up. "Thanks, honey. I thought you were done doing stupid stuff like that," she said, somewhere between furious and relieved. "I made it non-lethal on purpose," he told her. "I made a promise. I intend to keep it. If I hadn't known that I could survive it, I wouldn't have done it." "We need to restrain her," Gamble Shroud said as she leveled her sword at their enemy, who was trying to get up. "You, stay down." She shoved Switch roughly back down on her foot, who was blinking rapidly as her eyes tried to adjust back to normal lighting. "I'm on it," Kai grunted as he stepped forward and reached out with his hand, engaging his Vishuddha power again. "True speech. Chains." At his word, links of light appeared and wound themselves tightly around their enemy, restraining her movements. "Belladonna, if you could get something to blindfold and secure her on a more permanent basis." The latest blast had cleared the immediate area of anything large enough for the woman to use as cover, but they were still unsure of her quirk's range. Gamble Shroud moved to take the bow out of her hair, but was stopped when Switch began to chuckle in a low tone as she sneered at Kai by saying, "You were right, hero. I have to be able to see what I'm changing places with. But there's one itty-bitty detail that you missed." Gamble Shroud's eyes widened before she lunged forward with her sword, determined not to give Switch another chance to escape now that they had captured her. She aimed her blade carefully even at her speed, not wanting the blow to be a fatal one, seeing as they might be able to get some information out of her later. Switch smiled one more time before the blade pierced flesh and stuck into the ground below it, triggering a silence so complete that even the nature itself seemed to be muted for the moment. Kai's mouth was open in shock as a cold and biting, burning pain erupted from his chest, robbing him of his ability to breathe as he stared down at the sword buried up to the hilt in his ribs. The chains binding his body blinked out of existence as he released his quirk, his eyes slowly drifting back up toward Gamble Shroud, whose golden orbs were wide with horror as she realized what she had just done. "Hikari?" she whispered as her eyes drifted down toward her blood-covered weapon, some of the crimson stains having already spilled onto her fingers. Scarlet spots decorated her body and face, having been coughed up by Kai from the initial impact, each one feeling as though it burned her flesh where it landed. Switch's voice erupted into a full-on fit of giggling as Acid Queen let out a terrified scream, while she and the other girls charged forward, the villain forgotten as they rushed toward their wounded friend. "I can change places with people, too!" she shouted at them. This was enough to make the melting heroine snap, and she let out another raw-throated scream as she sent out whips of acid in the general direction of their enemy's voice, the liquid being powerful enough to cut through streetlights, carve lines in buildings, even burn clear through a car. But nowhere did she hit her mark, much to her fury. "I'll kill you!" she screamed furiously, tears racing down her cheeks. "Come near us again and I'll kill you, you crazy bitch!" Meanwhile, Kai was trying not to black out from the pain while he felt his blood pooling beneath him, dropping his body temperature at a steady rate while spots swam in front of his eyes. His head felt like it was going to explode, so he could barely make out what Yang was saying as she knelt in front of him next to Blake, but eventually he realized that she was shouting, "Come on, buddy, breathe! You're going into shock, you need to breathe through it, even if it hurts!" Once again, it took him a couple of seconds to really understand what she was saying, but when he did, he gathered his wits and forced himself to take in a breath, and immediately regretted it. He cried as blood seeped into his lung, which had been badly cut by the sword, and now he coughed it up, spraying bits of scarlet onto his friends and causing the pain to be even worse as his chest moved around the blade. "Freaking Renegon Quark! Seriously?" "Hikari!" Ruby yelped worriedly as she and her sister reached for their first aid kits, ignoring the blood that he had just accidentally spit on them. "Hang in there. You're gonna be okay." Blake could only stare down at her reddened hands on the spots on her outfit as her mind continued to try and process what she had just done. I know that," Kai gasped, trying to keep breathing and not choke on his blood at the same time, a delicate balance that was growing more impossible by the second. "I made a promise not to die of anything but old age." He coughed up more blood, groaning in agony as soon as he could breathe. "We gotta get the sword out," Yang said as she moved to pull on the handle, only to have her hand swatted away by her sister. "Ow! What the hell, sis? If we pull it out, he's just gonna bleed out faster," Ruby reminded her as she shut her cloak and placed it around Blake's katana in order to keep pressure on the grievous wound. "He's gotta have internal bleeding, which means that we have to keep the sword stable long enough for doctors to operate." "Rose, go get the first responders in Yamamo," Mina said as she came to kneel by Kurai's side, wiping furiously at her eyes and nose as she held her boyfriend's trembling hand. "She's at the shopping district. Please hurry." "You got it," the smaller girl promised. "Keep pressure on the two sides as best you can while I'm gone." She was then off in a blur of red flower remnants. Wind trailing behind her, she made all possible haste in aid of saving her friend. "Ashido. Hikari," Blake was mumbling as she fell to her knees, her whole body shaking as she continued to stare at the scarlet that had infected her skin and clothes. "I'm so... This isn't your fault." Kurai gasped as he began to shiver from the feeling of cold seeping into his body in the place of the lost blood. "It's okay. It's gonna be okay. I promise." "Shh, don't try to talk right now," Mina said in a broken voice as she cradled his head while her tears splashed onto his body. "No, talking is good. Keep him doing that," Yang said with a negative shake of her head. "Talking means that he's awake, and awake means that he's alive." "What do I talk about in a time like this?" Kurai gasped, tears of his own building up in the corner of his eyes as the pain began to get to him. The Star Wars franchise was never good, not even when George Lucas was running it," Mina said rapidly, causing her boyfriend's eyes to flick over toward her as they narrowed slightly while the tiniest smile quirked his mouth upward. "They're all overrated, and it was honestly almost a deal breaker for me how much you obsessed over them. I only put up with them because you let me watch Alien and Predator with you." "Okay. Now I just have to survive on principle, just to prove how utterly wrong you are," he wheezed through a weak chortle. "Ow, hurts to laugh." He took in a shuddering breath before he added, "And just for dissing the man himself, we are watching the entire Clone Wars series in chronological order." Mina was smiling at him while she nodded through her tears and shaking shoulders, and even though he knew that she was forcing it, the gesture did make him feel a little better. Morale was low among the heroes that evening, though the people on kitchen duty did their best not to let the people of Nabu Island know about it. The day had been one disaster after another for the teenagers, with 3 of their number seriously wounded and only 1 captured villain to show for it. Thanks to Ground Zero and Mirtanaster, everyone had survived. But half of them were fairly certain it was only because the villains simply hadn't felt like killing them. The beach team had been held off effortlessly by a beast-like villain, despite having overwhelming numbers advantage on the likes of Todoroki and Tokoyami to help them. The Switch villain had evaded capture despite sustaining wounds, and they managed to take out their single strongest hero with a cruel blow. The other woman, Slice, had mostly stayed out of the battle after destroying the harbor, though she had made an appearance long enough to help her leader retreat after a battle with Deku in Ground Zero. The leader himself was a masked man with silver hair who seemed to have multiple quirks at his disposal, which led the heroes to wonder if the League of Villains was involved in the island's current state of disarray, though they hadn't seen any of the core members as of yet. Izuku and Bakugo had suffered from electrical burns following a lightning blast strong enough to take out the power of the entire island, plus broken bones and cuts from other powers inflicted by the masked man. They were unconscious and undergoing treatment from the doctors, but Kurai was by far the worst among the wounded. Part of his rib cage on the right side of his body had been cut clean, the same wound leading to a cut on the corresponding lung, which was now losing air pressure due to excessive internal bleeding coming from several leaking arteries and veins. He had been forced to undergo emergency surgery on the spot when Ruby had returned with a surgeon in Yaoyorozu, who had fortunately been able to make all the necessary sterilized instruments that the doctor needed, but it still had been a rough ordeal. During the operation, after learning what blood type was needed, Ruby had also brought in Shoji, who was a match for Kurai, so that he could keep his classmate alive long enough to survive the ordeal. Since his quirk enabled him to sprout extra limbs on a whim, he was able to supply all the blood that they needed, though the effort and previous fight with the villains left him feeling severely worn out after the fact. Following that, Uraraka had been able to supply more blood for her friend's recovery, though she was unable to give as much as she would have liked, seeing as the process would have sapped her strength to the point where she would be unable to perform her duties as a heroine. Even so, the doctors had said that Kurai would be able to recover, and he was now resting near Bakugo and Izuku. He had lost consciousness partway into the operation, and Mina had not left his side, distraught enough that she had threatened to melt Ida after he insisted that she help with the food line. He too was worried about his friend, but it seemed to be trying to bury his concern in his work for caring for the frightened civilians, and it was causing them to butt heads harshly. Luckily, Yaoyorozu had been able to help the two reach a middle ground by having Mina work in the temporary med bay where the island's population was taking shelter so that she could look after Kurai, as well as the other injured patients alongside Todoroki and Uraraka. This kept the girl busy and near her boyfriend, so both parties were satisfied, for lack of a better term. It also didn't stop anyone from worrying about them, even as they struggled to get some of the backup generators in the shelter running, have the people fed, and reassuring them that they could handle it if the villains attacked again. He was getting close to midnight when Kurai finally stirred, his brow contorting in pain as his body alerted him just how much abuse he had endured that day. He was in a small room adjacent to the doctor's ward, which afforded him a little more privacy due to his need for undisturbed rest more than even his unconscious classmates. Oh, he gurgled, feeling some blood in the back of his throat, which he tried to spit out with limited success. That's nasty. Kurai! Mina exclaimed, her eyes lighting up as she passed a set of cool rags to Todoroki, who took them without complaint as she bolted over to her boyfriend's side. Take it easy. The doctors managed to stabilize you, but if you strain yourself, you could open up your stitches and... Mina... He coughed, wiping his mouth free of blood as well as he could before looking at her with tired eyes. I'm okay. I'll be okay. I promised. I know, she said, hanging her head in shame. I'm so sorry, Kurai. I didn't handle any of this well at all. I went crazy on the villain after you went down. I panicked and couldn't figure out what to do with your injury, and Mina, Kurai said again, smiling through gritted teeth. It's okay. God knows I probably would have done the same if I'd seen you hurt by a psychopath. I'm just sorry that I've scared you again. Is that all you're sorry for? She asked with a strangled half-laugh. Actually, no. He grunted as she helped him get into a sitting position. I'm sorry I didn't double-tap that crazy villain. He and Mina shared in a laugh after that. And that, more than any reassurances from the doctor, told her that he would be okay. The last time he had been this badly injured, he hadn't been able to joke about it, not until she had managed to talk him up a little. Now, he was the one comforting her, which told her that he was confident in his ability to survive this. Good to see you awake, Hikari, Todoroki said as he came closer, having finished his round of errands for the moment. We were all pretty scared there for a while. This, Kurai snorted as he pointed at his chest, and immediately regretting it, as the movement caused him more pain. Ow! 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 Okay. This sucks. Not as much as the arm thing, but not fun. As he moved, he noticed that the side where he had been stabbed felt odd beyond the obvious reasons, as if something had been added to his ribs, making the skin over them feel somewhat distorted. As I was about to say earlier, you're officially on bed rest orders, Mina told him as she sat down and nuzzled his shoulder, tear stains dampening his bared skin while she breathed a lengthy sigh of relief. You've got some kind of pin thingamabobs holding your ribs together while you got stabbed, and they don't have much give. No fighting until you've seen a stronger healer. Got it? Yes, ma'am. He nodded before he felt his throat catch, and he was hacking up blood from his lung again. It lasted a couple of minutes, but eventually he was able to settle himself down and spit the red liquid into a towel that Todoroki provided him. Thanks, he wheezed. Sorry about the mess. It's all right, the heterochromic boy said as he stood up to go. I'll go get the medicine that the doctor had Yaoyorozu prepare for you. Thanks, pal. As he left, Kurai noticed the other half-dozen people in the med bay, Izuku and Bakugo among them. So, those two are down. He grunted as his wounds throbbed painfully. How bad are we? Comms are still down, but Yamamoto sent a drone off to the mainland that's broadcasting an SOS. The pink girl began. It's going to be at least a 6-hour flight, so the soonest we could expect reinforcements is tomorrow late morning. And even then, we'd have no idea who could help us. Bakugo and Shinee captured one of the villains, and he's locked up in the basement. Everyone else had some minor injuries, but there's been no fatalities, civilian or hero. Oh, thank God for that. Kurai sighed, breathing a little more easily. Yeah, but that's about where the good news ends, she sighed. The villain hasn't said a word about what they're doing here, and we still have at least 4 villains loose on Nabu, 2 of which were able to take out our heavy hitters, one that throws punches as hard as All Might. No way he's that strong. The guy weaponized wind pressure like Izuku does when he goes up to 25%, according to Ochako, Mina said with a grimace, causing her boyfriend to look at her with alarm. Yeah. The last one is kind of an unknown, but her hair turns super sharp and can be used as a weapon, we think. Is her hair red? Kurai asked curiously. Yeah, Mina answered with a frown. How do you know that? Pretty sure she's the one who destroyed the harbor. He sighed as he hung his head. Izuku and I found a bunch of these red needles that were very hard to cut through metal, and like they were so hard they could cut through metal like it was nothing. They wrecked it wrecked every ship on the island, and it couldn't have taken her more than a couple of minutes to do it. Damn, Mina muttered. So the bottom line is they're all strong and we're out of our league. No such thing, Kurai said with an emphatic shake of his head. We've seen their powers, and we have a better idea of how they work now. Maybe we can flip the script and somehow get the drop on them next round. We can take advantage of our numbers. We? Mina asked with a raised eyebrow. You're staying in bed, remember? Okay, I meant like the royal we. Uh-huh. Sue me. If I can't fight, I can still strategize, Kurai said with a strange note in his voice. Right after I cough up my lungs. With that, he leaned over and started another hacking fit to try and rid his body of the displaced blood. Blake couldn't get it out. She could still smell the blood, feel it in the pores of her skin, see it dripping down from her hands. No matter how hard she scrubbed her hands and arms, no matter how much her skin was begging for her to stop before she scrubbed them raw, she couldn't wash the lifeblood of her friend from her body. Almost worse than that, she could only hear 2 things playing on loop in her head over and over again. The sound of her sword piercing Kurai's flesh and pinning him to the ground beneath, and the thought, I did it again. First in the forest during their summer vacation, now this. I did it again. She could feel the slight resistance that her hands had encountered the instant that her sword had entered his body. Twice now her actions had led to Kurai being on death's door. I did it again. She could hear the sound of the breath being driven from his body as she pinned him to the ground. For the second time, her haste had hurt someone she was supposed to protect, and this time she couldn't even claim to be indirectly responsible. I did it again. She could smell the blood that spilled onto her hands and onto her body and legs. Her sword had nearly taken Kurai's life, and worse, it had happened by her own hands. I did it again. She still couldn't get the blood out, even after scrubbing her hands for 20 minutes in the bathroom. I did it again. Her eyes wandered up toward the mirror where she could see more blood splashed across her body, staining her soul with the color of her comrade's death. I did it again. She began to claw at her face where some of the blood was, but again, her wiping at it did nothing to remove the stains. I did it again. She could already see his body wrapped in a shroud, all of his friends mourning the life that he would never be able to achieve. Her head felt like it was cracking open as the thought continued to reverberate in her mind, growing louder and louder with each repeat. I did it again. Get off, she said in a hoarse whisper. The jolt of her sword hitting the ground through her friend's body jarred her hands anew. I did it again. Get off of me. Blake begged the blood, but it ignored her. The smell of iron was growing even stronger, choking her, cutting off her ability to take in a breath of fresh oxygen. I did it again. Get off, get off! She finally screamed, unable to take the haunted, tortured look the mirror was giving her with her own eyes. I didn't mean for it to happen. I did it again. Go away, she begged as the tears finally fell from her eyes. No, said the phantom in the mirror, paralyzing her in place as its bloodstains began to spread even further, until she was completely dressed in scarlet. I won't leave you, not ever. I am the thing in every dark corner of your mind, Blake. I am what keeps you up in the blackest part of the night. I am your destiny, the inescapable doom of the people you call your friends. No, please, I didn't. Who are you kidding? The reflection taunted her. You're getting so worked up, and for someone who never even gave you a second look, no matter how many times you looked when no one else was watching. It's time to face reality, Blake. All you do is hurt the people you care about, especially those you think you could love. You are a disease. With a choked snarl of despair and fury, Blake drew her fist back and smashed it into the mirror, not caring that the broken glass bit her hand and sliced deep into her flesh. All she cared about was getting rid of the horrible image in front of her. You did it again. The voice taunted her from the darkest corner of her mind as she broke down and sobbed uncontrollably.
How goes his recovery?
Chimera asked as he entered the little cabin that Slice and Switch had appropriated for the sake of their leader. He's doing well, Slice answered confidently. I imagine he'll be up in just a few hours.
Good.
The beast man nodded. Glancing at the two women, he asked, Did either of you see Mummy on the way over? No, Switch said with a frown. I'm starting to think that those heroes got him.
You judge too, huh?
Chimera growled.
I still find it hard to believe that he would lose, especially to a bunch of kids.
Despite his words, the fact that it had been several hours since they had met up under the signal flare without any sign of their comrades spoke of no good news for the man. Either way, it doesn't change the plan. Switch shrugged as she swept her short hair out of her face. We know that the target is on the island, and they have no way of leaving. Once 9 is up, we can finish the hunt, begin the new world order. As she spoke, each of them thought back to the time that they had met their leader and the world he had spoken of. It would be a place where only power would determine one's fate, and the stronger they were, the grander their destiny would be. For one such as Chimera, who had been mocked and feared as a monster since his birth, it would be a utopia. For Switch, it was a chance at revenge against everyone who had ever ignored her existence due to her plain appearance in a world full of superhumans with far more alluring people and powers. Slice had her own reasons for joining 9, but since she had been with him the longest, none of the others knew what it was, nor had they ever thought to ask. All that mattered to them was the future that 9 had promised them, nothing else.
We bet everything on you,
Chimera thought as he looked down at the sleeping form of his friend.
9, you better not die on us.
Mina and Kudai talked for a little bit longer before one of the doctors came in to see the boy. How are you feeling? The man asked as Mina moved aside to let him have a look at her boyfriend.
Probably about as crappy as I look, he joked through a wince. How bad actually is it? I don't remember much from before I passed out.
We had to do an old-style invasive surgery.
Yeah, that part I remember.
I think we got all the veins and arteries patched up, and we managed to stitch the torn lung tissue back together, the doctor said with a tired smile. I was able to use my quirk to close up the skin, but that's about all my powers allow me to do, and the skin is still thin there. Thanks to Creati, we were also able to set a few internal fixations on the ribs we had to cut through, so the bone should heal straight and proper, after which the sets will dissolve on their own, unless you see a surgeon that can heal you completely and remove the devices before your body runs its natural healing course. Unfortunately, the environment was far from sterile, but we decided we would have to risk an airborne contaminant as opposed to you bleeding to death if we tried to move you. For now, I suggest you keep an eye out for even the first sign of infection, and bear in mind that any excessive movement could cause the wounds to reopen, both inside and out. Unless you can see someone with a much more powerful healing quirk, you're looking at several weeks of recovery time, at least. Told you. I wasn't gonna fight! Uh-huh.
Guys, make room!
Shouted Kirishima just before the door was opened to admit him and Yang, who were carrying an unconscious Blake between them, her right hand bleeding something fierce.
Doc, where are you? We need help.
Coming, the man at Kardai's side called as he rushed over to assist the heroes. What happened? Was it another villain? I don't think so, Yang said a little breathlessly. I found her in the bathroom in front of a broken mirror, glass in her hand. I had Kirishima help me because I'm too tired to carry her on my own. Wait, she punched a mirror? Uraraka said worriedly as the doctor set about using his quirk to close the skin of his newest patient. What? Why? I think I know, but I'd better keep it to myself until I have a chance to talk to her. Yang muttered as she stepped back, a frown on her face. Blake's always had a tough time with taking too much stuff on her own, but I never thought I'd actually see her crack like this. Kurt-Eye looked at the dark-haired girl with sympathy before he said, I think I know what happened too. Yang gave him a sad sort of smile, but before she could say anything, they were interrupted by a certain redhead. Hikari! Kirishima called out with a relieved smile when he started to walk over. Hey, man, how you holding up? Well, I didn't see the afterlife this time, so I'd say pretty good, all things considered. His friend chuckled painfully. Setting the bar a little low, aren't you? The redhead grinned as they bumped fists. Too right, Kurt-Eye grinned back. That way I can easily exceed expectations. As he watched the doctor move from Blake's bedside, his face sobered up a bit as he asked, Hey, guys, can you help me up? I need to talk to Belladonna as soon as she wakes, and I'd rather she have my cot until she recovers. Why? Kirishima asked him. Because I'm probably the reason she ended up like that. It took some time for Blake to recover from the blood loss, so Mina had Kurt-Eye eat a little bit while he waited for the girl to wake up. Waiting at the foot of another pretty girl to recover from getting hurt while I'm right here next to you, Mina teased him, causing him to roll his eyes. Have you no shame, sir? The medbay had gotten a pair of surprise visitors in the form of Mahuro and Katsuma, the latter of whom claimed to have a power that could help Izuku and Bakugo recover from their injuries more quickly. The two of them had been injured protecting the siblings from the leader of the villains, though why he had been after them at all had yet to be disclosed, as the only ones who could tell them were still sleeping. Mina had nearly asked the boy to help Hikari first, but the other hero had told her not to bother for the time being, on the grounds that their friends were still unconscious, and therefore needed more immediate medical attention. He knew that he was going to be okay, but they couldn't be certain of the same for them. I'm pretty sure you've killed off any sense of shame that I had before I came to our school. He answered readily with a grin that made Mina laugh. He had coughed up a fair amount out of his lungs, and he was starting to breathe a little easier now that he was sitting up. I'm glad to see that your sense of humor is still alive, said Ida as he entered the room, looking relieved to see his friend awake again. Mina, on the other hand, tensed up slightly, as if preparing herself for a confrontation. Hey, Kurt-Eye said as he reached up to shake hands with his oldest friend. I heard you kept the show running nicely. Glad to know you're doing okay yourself. Okay might be overselling it, the class president replied with a rueful smile. All the same, I'm glad to see you conscious. I understand that you can't fight, but we're having a meeting to discuss the villains in a little while. Do you feel up to joining us? I could use your ideas. You got it, pal, Kurt-Eye assured him. Come and get me when it starts, because I don't want to have to move any more than I absolutely have to. Even injured, he still wanted to contribute to the upcoming fight, having no doubt that there would, in fact, be a round 2. I understand, Ida nodded. To Mina, he surprised her by saying, Forgive my behavior earlier, Ashido. I used my stress over the current situation as an excuse to lash out at you, which I should not have done. I am sorry. He bowed deeply to her from the waist, leading Kurt-Eye to wonder just what had happened while he was unconscious. Mina, to her credit, stood up and returned the bow before straightening up and saying, I shouldn't have yelled either. I'm sorry, Ida. I guess we're both a little irrational when it comes to worrying about this guy. I suppose so, Ida nodded, a look of understanding passing between the two of them. Would you mind helping me set up in the meeting room? Everyone else is wrapping up with the kitchen. You okay if I go? Mina asked her boyfriend, who smiled and made a shooing motion with his hand. I'll be okay on my own for 20 minutes, he promised them. Doctors are here in case I somehow started bleeding out again. Kurt-Eye, I'm sorry, I can't turn it off! Once the other heroes were gone, Kurt-Eye contented himself with watching Katsuma work tirelessly to save Bakugo and Izuku. He had no doubt that Deku's kindness and determination had affected the little boy, as it had others before him. If this kid is serious about becoming a hero someday, you probably helped to shape the hero he will become, he thought as he watched his friend sleep fitfully. While Katsuma labored, Kurt-Eye was surprised when Mahuro approached him with a bashful look on her face. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, she said as she looked at the floorboards. You know, for the other day. Kurt-Eye couldn't help but raise an eyebrow as he replied, You already apologized. Why do it again? 'Cause I didn't mean it that time, the little girl admitted, her eyes still downcast. I thought that you and your friends weren't really heroes. I didn't think that you would act like them if people really needed you. You mean if Katsuma really needed us? Kurt-Eye said softly, drawing Maharo's eyes up toward him in surprise. Seeing it, the hero grinned and said, Believe it or not, I kind of get it. I trust heroes more than you, granted, but I have a younger brother who I want to keep safe with my own efforts. I suspect that you're much the same. Maharu could only nod, too surprised to speak after being seen through so accurately by a person she barely knew. Kudai then said, I thought so. The thing about little brothers is they have a habit of surprising us older siblings with their own capabilities. I know I wouldn't be alive if not for mine. Wait, your brother saved you? Maharu gaped. But I heard your friends talking about you. Your powers seem amazing. How could your younger brother possibly save your life if you're that good? I'm obviously not that good. If this is the shape I end up in after a fight with a villain. Kudai chuckled before coughing into his towel again, alarming the little girl when red showed up in the fabric. He moved to reassure her as soon as he could talk by saying, It's not that bad as it was, trust me. When she hesitated, he went on to say, Back to my brother. His name is Akururi, by the way. He's not a fighter like me, but he's very resourceful and smart. And as it turns out, he's very, very brave. Probably even braver than me. How is that? It's a long story, but the short version is that he sacrificed his ability to walk and talk in order to save my life when I was fighting a villain. Kudai answered, his eyes darkening ever so slightly. At first, I wasn't even sure if he would live, and even after he started to recover, it was clear that his life would never be the same again. I was so upset with myself for letting that happen, but I had to learn to move on with my life and accept that I couldn't change what had already happened. How did you do that? Maharu asked. Why would you be okay with him being hurt at all? Wouldn't you rather him that he was okay? Of course I would, Kudai nodded tiredly. But like I said, there's nothing I can do about it now, so it's either stay sad for the rest of my life or make something of myself. I was able to move forward when I realized that he had done it because he loves me. As much as I wish I could go back and change what had happened, he would go back just as many times to keep things the same so that I could be all right. When Maharu was silent again, looking back at her little brother, Kudai felt compelled to add, We can wish well for them all we want, but in the end, they choose their own destinies, even if it happens to be one that we don't want. More than that, it's our job as their family to support their decisions, especially if they're doing it out of love for us. So, you know that Katsuma wants to be a hero someday? Maharu inquired as she looked back at the wounded hero who was smiling again. If you ask me, he's already shaping up to be a good one, he told her as he continued to watch Katsuma labor over his peers. He's working hard to be one for my friends, and goodness knows they could use a hero right about now. He may be a little guy, but even the smallest little voice can go on to make the loudest noise. You really think so? The girl asked as his eyes went back to meet hers. I do, he nodded sincerely. And he'll go even further than he could on his own if you're there to help him, Maharu. Glancing down at his replacement arm, he added in a softer tone, Without my little brother, I don't know that I would be standing at all. When Maharu started to search his gaze, however, his eyes flicked back up and he said, I appreciate the apology. You're a good sister to look after Katsuma the way that you have. And you're a good hero, Kai. Mind doing me a favor, Maharu? Sure. Do you mind telling my friends that I might be a bit late to the meeting? I'm not feeling up to walking just yet. Maharu nodded dutifully before saying, You can count on me. Kudai grinned as she departed, saying, I appreciate it. As soon as she was gone, however, he dropped the smile and said in a lowered tone, I hope you're awake enough to talk about what happened. Would it make a difference if I said that I don't want to? Blake's voice was tired, but she seemed lucid enough to carry a conversation. No. Kudai sighed heavily. I can recognize the look of someone who's a victim to the suffering of their own mind enough to know when it's time to reach out. How do you figure that? She asked him as she sat up, her eyes trained on the scarred tissue of her right hand. Because I've seen it in myself. Though I'm sure you already knew that. He muttered just loud enough for her to hear him. Let me just cut to the quick and say that I forgive you, Belladonna. I hold nothing against you. It doesn't change the fact that twice now my actions have nearly gotten you killed, she said bitterly. This just goes to show that I'm not cut out to be a hero after all. Bull, he told her sternly, knowing exactly what she was referring to. Back in the forest at camp, you may have made the call to go check on Todoroki and Bakugo. but it was my actions alone that put me between him and Moonfish. You had no fault in that any more than me being a target of the villain this afternoon. If anyone is to blame, it's our enemies. If I'd taken a different path, you might have never been pitted against them in the first place, she insisted. Keyword there is might, he said, giving her pause. I was always going to become a hero, and that means that even if it hadn't been you by my side, I would have ended up facing them. And for argument's sake, even if it hadn't been them, I would have faced off with somebody else who could have just as easily wounded me like this. Belladonna, you're forgetting that I might not be alive if it weren't for you. What are you talking about? She seemed genuinely confused, so he softened his voice as he reminded her. After my arm was taken, it was you who told Todoroki to cauterize my wound. If you hadn't done that, I probably would have bled out before we thought of a solution to keep that from happening. Blake continued to hesitate at his words then. Truth be told, she had forgotten that crucial fact from that fateful night. It didn't ease her guilty conscience, but for the moment, it seemed to keep it from continuing to grow in its intensity. With that in mind, she could only murmur, Thank you, Hikari. Kurdai. Huh? You saved my life. Now we face death together a couple of times, he said with the ghost of a smile. You've more than earned the right to call me by my first name. Is this how you normally thank people for putting you in the hospital? Blake asked him dubiously. Only when they're my friends, Kurdai said, trying not to laugh out of fear of another coughing fit. Now let's get up on over to the meeting. We've got villains to stop. Once the two of them had gotten to their feet, Blake helped Kurdai walk toward the room where their classmates were gathered. Before they'd even left the medical room, they were surprised to be joined by Izuku and Bakugo. I thought you guys were going to be down for a while, Kurdai said as Izuku took him from the girl, apparently being well enough to support his friend's weight better than her. It's thanks to Katsuma here, the green-haired hero said as he favored the boy who was following them with a smile. He has a cell activation quirk that speeds up healing and enhances physical performance. Our bones aren't completely healed, but we could definitely move around and fight if we need to. Thanks for looking out for these guys, Kurdai said to the boy, who nodded bashfully in response. So what happened to you? Bakugo asked as he looked Kurdai up and down. There was a villain at the police precinct that got the better of me, Kurdai admitted. She has the power to switch objects and people with herself and each other, which she used to put me in the line of friendly fire. You got shot? Izuku yelped, looking startled. No, Blake hesitated before looking at Kurdai, who nodded with a reassuring smile. I went to injure the villain in a way that would make it impossible for her to run away, but she took advantage of my haste and switched places with Kurdai. She switched the name at a raised eyebrow from him before she added, I wound up stabbing him with my katana. He's been operated on, but there's still internal bleeding, and he's having trouble keeping his lung inflated. Did you know that blood tastes so much worse coming up than when it goes down? Kurdai said with a slightly loopier smile. Hey, kid, Bakugo said as he started to walk ahead of the others, though they soon realized he was talking to Katsuma. If you got more juice left in the tank, you better work on Saiyaman here. He'll need his strength back if he's going to take revenge against the chick that did this to him. So, power theft, Kurdai said while slowly releasing a pent-up breath. In essence, he is All for One 2.0. He and the others had just learned that the leader of the villains menacing the island not only possessed multiple powers, but he could also apparently steal them. He had tried to steal Izuku's, but had been unable to for reasons unknown to those unaware of One for All's true nature. All Might said it was a power that couldn't be stolen, so I guess it still applies to others besides All for One, he thought with a small measure of relief. They weren't sure if this new villain was a subordinate of the League, or if he just had a similar power to All for One, but either way, he was clearly a threat that could not be left to wander freely, especially given that he had no problem targeting heroes and little kids. Why is he targeting Katsuma, though? Ruby asked with a frown. That's what I don't get. No offense, but cell activation doesn't seem like a power that a psycho villain would want. But what if he needs it? Izuku interjected, drawing everyone's eyes back to him. He looked at Bakugo before he went on to say, When Kacchan and I were fighting him, there was a moment where he could have had us all dead to rights. We were totally at his mercy, but instead of finishing us off, he suddenly doubled over in pain. My guess is that using so many different powers puts a toll on his body. Kurdai's eyes lit up as he looked at Katsuma, who's currently struggling to help his body recover from its own grievous wounds, while Mina watched him work with fascination in her eyes. That would explain why he needs a cell activation quirk, he said in agreement. If he could make use of Katsuma's power, he wouldn't be hindered by his body's limitations. So we know what they're after and why, but how does that help us stop them? Yaoyorozu asked. She was lying on a couch, apparently needing rest after having overused her powers to provide the instruments needed to save Kodai's life, get the shelter's backup generators up and running, supplying toiletries to the civilians, and other necessary tasks. Kaminari was also resting, his mind having been overtaxed by his quirk after lending it to the power supply of the building. Easy, we take the kid, book it back to the mainland, Yang said with a grin. It's not that simple, Todoroki countered somewhat to her annoyance. Seeing the look, he added, these guys are serious. If we take Katsuma away, they may start targeting the other islanders until they get what they want. So just hand me over to them, the little boy said, surprising everyone in the room. Katsuma, no, Mahuro protested, but her brother was already shaking his head. I'll be fine without a quirk, he insisted. And if it means that everyone else can be okay, then I don't mind giving it up. That's what a hero would do, right? He looked up to Izuku and Kodai as if asking them to confirm what he had asked, leading them to look at one another for a brief moment. A hero does know that it's sometimes necessary to make a sacrifice. Yes, Kodai began. Before anyone could start yelling at him, he quickly added, but only as an absolute last resort, got it? If there's any chance that you can keep your power and deny this villain what he wants, we have to take it. Real heroes remember they have family and friends who depend on them, and so they fight to make sure that everyone gets to make it out okay. It's important to remember that even those heroes are a part of everyone. Understand? Long story short, there's no way in hell we're handing you over, kid. Bakugo snorted as he crossed his arms. We're gonna beat the crap out of these villains and make them regret ever being born. Yeah, Yang cheered. What he said. The only way for us to resolve this safely is to stop these villains before they get to Katsuma, Ida decided. If this man gets the cell activation quirk, there's no telling how powerful he will become, and certainly none of us will be safe. I say we make our stand. Right, Todoroki said firmly. I'm in, Sero called. Obvi. Mina grinned as she grabbed Kodai's metal hand while Ochako grabbed Izuku's. Team Lightning Drop's on the case. Don't forget Team Ruby, Weiss said with a little smirk. One by one, the class unanimously decided that the next time they encountered the villains, it would be on their terms. We'll protect Katsuma and everyone else, Izuku said as he bumped fists with Kodai. And once the dust settles, we'll be the ones left standing, the Guardian Hero assured the two kids. What's our motto, guys? Plus Ultra! Everyone else shouted. It was the crack of dawn the next morning, and despite the fact that they were about to have what could be a very long day, Kodai could not sleep. Katsuma had done his best to heal him, even being able to mostly repair the bones that had been cut by the different blades the previous day, but he still had some rattling in his chest, and coughed up some more blood since his treatment had finished. He was cleared to provide long-range support in the upcoming fight, but he knew that if he fought at close quarters, he would likely reopen some of his internal wounds, which could cause a serious problem in the middle of battle. Even fighting at a distance was going to be limited on his part, as he had to restrain himself from overtaxing his quirk. He'd never had any internal injuries other than his head before, so he didn't really know how using his powers, especially the chakra abilities, would affect him in such a state. Everyone else was sleeping for what would be a measly 4 hours, but it was the best they could do given the circumstances, and some sleep was better than none at all. As Kodai looked to his right to see Mina sleeping peacefully, he smiled to himself. She can sleep through just about anything but a thunderstorm, he thought as he carefully extricated himself from the blankets that had been provided to him. Moving silently, he grabbed up his scouter from where it lay on top of his hero costume, and made for the outside, where he would be undisturbed with his thoughts. His smile faded away as he walked through the dark halls of the shelter and thought, I'm fighting for everyone today, myself included. But the truth is that no matter how good a plan is, there's always room for something to go wrong, and I've always done my best to be prepared for that. Kodai knew why he couldn't sleep, even if he didn't want to admit it out loud. He had a feeling in his gut that something big was coming. He wasn't sure if it was because the villain they were about to face reminded him of All For One, or if his newest near-death experience had rattled him worse than he had thought, but something in the back of his mind wouldn't let him rest easy. He would have almost called the feeling nostalgic, except that he didn't exactly get the warm fuzzies thinking about the grave he could have easily filled multiple times now, especially now that it felt as though one more step on his journey to become a hero would lead him right back into it. And if I fall in one more time, somehow I doubt I'll be able to get out before the nails seal me in, he thought morbidly as a shiver ran down his spine. I wonder if Dad knew what was coming, or if he at least had something of an idea before he died that night. He mused silently as he exited the building, shivering slightly as the air of the pre-dawn. If he did, I bet it felt an awful lot like this. He wasn't shaking in fear, or his breathing was even enough for someone who had been stabbed, and he felt no sweat on his brow. It wasn't even like he could say that there was a feeling of dread in the air. Kurai just had a feeling that something was coming, and if it really was his end, he needed to leave his friends and family with the closure that his father had not been able to give his. So he found a quiet spot behind the large building in the shade of a tree where he sat down, wincing as his chest ached, but being grateful that he was not subject to another coughing fit. He glanced around himself to make sure that he was alone before he placed his scouter on his ear and hit a button which caused a recording symbol to light up on the blue lens. He had several things he needed to say, and not a lot of time to say them, so he hoped that his tongue would hold out well enough for him to not have to repeat himself. I hope that this never reaches your ears, guys, but something tells me I'd best be ready, he thought before he took a deep breath and began to talk. This message is meant for Detective Tsukuuchi of the Japanese police force, as well as the faculty members of UA High School, specifically those in charge of the hero course, he said in as clear a voice as he could manage. For identification purposes, allow me to state that this is being recorded by Kurai Hikari, UA Hero Course student and a provisionally licensed hero, operating under the alias of the Guardian Hero.
Even if they doubt me, push me where I stand, I will say it proudly, soon you know who I am. There is something that sleeps within you, listen close. You will soon know every door that is open for you, one is closed. Soon you will know what's on the other side.
All right, you little bloodthirsty gremlins, you wanted it, you got it.
Or do they?
Everybody was complaining that I was taking way too long to kill him, and now we're coming up on it.
He's not dead yet.
Yeah, but now they know that they know that it's about to happen.
Do they, though?
I mean, I've said it multiple times throughout this whole thing that, you know, when the message comes along, you know, he's gonna die.
Well, we know that, yeah. Also, we're gonna be, raptured at some point. Just kidding. Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Now you can't even blame. Now you guys can't even blame me for torturing you. It's her now. It's all on her now.
I'm just kidding. I'm feeling extra snarky today. I have like no voice from hurting children all week.
This will be fun.
All right, let's do this.
All right, yeah. So we open up on the villains coming in. So to explain Switch's quirk, Kurai kind of makes an offhanded comment about it later on that I'll get to. But he's like, are you serious? I got hit by a Renegon quirk? So basically, the inspiration for Switch's quirk is Sasuke's Renegon Eye from Naruto Shippuden. And for those unfamiliar with that, basically, if it's within his line of sight and it's within a certain range, this guy can teleport him. He can't teleport to something. He can exchange places with it. But with some practice, he learns how to do it like with other, like he can swap other items, he can swap other people, he can swap himself with another person, etc., etc. So that's kind of where I got the idea for this quirk, and I felt that it would fit in with A, this crew, and B, this situation that I needed quite well.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know. Did you think it was a power that seemed to fit, or did you feel like it was kind of shoehorned in there?
No, it fit. There was, I mean, I think because we have the guy with the bandages doing his thing. And so, you know, somebody subduing and capturing objects in people, then using them as weapons, and someone who can switch objects in people, I feel like that fits.
Okay.
They seem to work well together.
Yeah. So then we had the scene with, so originally it was Purple Great Boy and Aoyama and Hagakure who were helping out at the airport, and then they go out and there's a villain terrorizing stuff. In this one we had Weiss, and originally I was going to keep this scene a fair amount shorter, but then I was like, no, this is a good opportunity for Weiss to kind of show her stuff. So we got her like you know, she sees the situation, she very quickly assesses it. She's like, okay, we need to do this and this. So it's like, she's like, all right, first we need to get reinforcements. Reinforcements aren't available. So instead of just like letting Hagakure kind of just panic and sit there like they did in the movie, she tells her, okay, go help people evacuate, get them out of here.
Yeah, which is nice because it really highlights her leadership ability.
Yeah.
And her
Weiss does
assertiveness.
have leadership abilities. She was just superseded by somebody else who had more natural talent.
Yeah. But no, yeah, it's good because she's able to, like, you know, allocate jobs and give Hagakure something that she can focus on. Because, you know, she's awesome too. And so it's nice that Weiss is able to redirect that energy somewhere else and keep her productive.
Yeah. So yeah, I quite enjoy, like, again, it's always like those little things that I can throw in there. I feel like I almost enjoy writing like the little things that add to the main narrative almost more than I do like the big grand events. Like, those are certainly great to write. I do enjoy those. But like, I feel like because of all the little moments that I try to sprinkle in here and there, that those big moments end up having more of an impact later on down the line.
Okay.
Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because like it's really hard to find a balance between like adding something for extra flavor and not just trailing it off into a side quest. So like that's definitely been one of the things that I've been trying to work on in this story.
Gotcha. All right.
Let's see. Next, we had Ruby and Yang met up with the Switch villain at the police precinct.
Yes.
I thought I thought that might be kind of a fun I could very easily see like the Monty style action happening like in a fight like that where this person's like just blanking out of the way, and these like you got one who's a super speeder and the other one who can break a building in half whenever she punches it, and them just like trying desperately to hit
track
something
of this thing,
and it's not happening. So I thought that was a good matchup to start.
And then they're joined up by Blake, and Kudai comes in later. Yes.
Blake goes in with Mina, and Kudai goes in separately because so before that happens, we have the incident down at the beach, and again I was gonna kind of skim over this, but I kind of wanted to add a little bit of something where his like Kudai's classmates are kind of like they're not trying to emulate him completely, but like they've seen what he does, and like of course they admire him for it, and you know they're trying to they're trying to stiffen their spines a little bit. But I liked how I was able to have Tokoyami be the one who's like, no, we're not him. We can't do things the same way that he does them. We got to do things we got to do things in a way that works for us. So that was another like. That one might have felt a little bit side questy, but I still enjoyed putting it in there.
Okay. Yeah, and I think it's safe to say that a lot of the battles kind of turned out pretty similarly as the original.
Yeah. Like when things are gonna have the same result as they did in the original part of the story, I tend to like not even cover it except like to mention it in the past tense. But I felt like there was enough that changed in these encounters that justified, like that was the last time I showed the fight at the beach. After that, it was just like, nah, it went the same as it did in the original because none of the Ruby characters are there. Kudai didn't go there, so just same result.
Gotcha.
The only thing that changed was the beginning interaction with the villain.
Yeah. So then, of course, we have the crazy, horrible accident that occurs.
Well, that's not even happened yet.
No?
First we got Ida. Like Ida kind of gets to show off here for a minute because he gets like. It's like, all right, we got one villain. Okay, I can handle this. We got two villains now. Okay, maybe not handle this. Three villains now. Okay, maybe we start panicking. Ida's like, no, we're the only ones here. We have to do this. There's no way we can get back up. You go there, you go there, you go there. And he steps up. He does a real... I liked how they handled that in the movie. Like, him and Yajirozu were really on it.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, you guys are combat teams. You guys are going to be the relief teams. You're going to be the first aid team. And they did that in like 20 seconds, and then they sent them all off.
Because they know their team strengths, and they've been spending time getting to know the community, and so it's nice because they're able to make those quick decisions.
And to throw a little bit extra, like to throw something personal in there, you know, Ida knows Kudai. Like, he's known him since they've known each other since they were children. He knows how Kudai's going to react in a situation like this. So the next scene is where Izuku and Kudai are like, all right, you're going to go look for the kids. I'm going to go to the police station. Ida predicted what Kudai was going to do before he even went out and did it.
Yeah.
Like that, moments like that, because of the way their friendship deteriorated for a while and it took time to repair itself, I haven't been able to show moments like this as often as I honestly wanted to. But I felt like this was a really good opportunity to show us like, no, these guys know each other really well.
No, yeah, that's really cool.
Let's see. So yeah, so the boys, they investigate the harbor. They kind of are having similar thoughts, and they're like, all right, we need to figure out how many villains there are. We need to go keep them from causing more chaos. We also need to keep the kids safe. So split the difference, and they take off. After that, we have Bakugo coming in for the rescue with Weiss, and he gets caught, and instead of him setting himself free like he did in the movie, I had Weiss do it because again, I wanted her to get a minute in the spotlight because I'm like, again, she's really annoying in the original Ruby show for quite a while, but she's really sharp.
Well, and then when she comes into her own, she's a total beast.
Yes, and like that's kind of the point in her character arc that she's hitting here. I wanted to illustrate. I'm like, because she's really cool, and I want like she deserves a chance to show off. So I was like, you know what? We'll still get. I'm like, obviously Bakugo has to get the last bit in because that's just who he is. But she was able to very quickly get him there, which I thought I had fun with that. Let's see. Then we have the bit where Mina and Blake show up. Kurdai saves Yang and Ruby from getting knuckle dusted. They start having a fight. They try a few different ideas. He's kind of trying out that new true speech power that he's got going on, which, like, I don't know if I did this on purpose or not, but I realized kind of post writing that I'm like, he's kind of acting a little too cocky here. Like he's barely unlocked this power, like, and he's just kind of like, nah, I'm gonna test this. I'm gonna use this. I'm gonna test and see what this thing can do in this situation, which is a really bad call on his part.
Yeah, I mean, after everything he's been through, he's probably thinking, oh yeah, it's just a random
like
villain.
The last fight that he came off of was a Nomu.
Yeah,
was a black Nomu, which the first time he fought one of those, it almost killed him. And so to have him surmount that, like, he's not an arrogant person, but that swagger and confidence, he's turning 16 soon. He's got that adolescent mind, is like, even if he's not overt about it, he's feeling his oath. He's getting a
little bit big for his britches, and everyone's been doing nothing but talking him up for the last few weeks and building that false sense of confidence. So it's not even a
false sense of confidence.
Yeah, but he's not being careful like he normally would.
Yes. He has caution. Normally he has caution to go with his confidence. If that makes sense. Like I feel like confidence is tempered by caution. If confidence is not tempered, it becomes arrogance. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So he's kind of starting to lean into that arrogance a little bit.
There's a difference between being strong and confident in who you are and being a little bit inflating yourself.
Yeah. So, he definitely pays the price for that. I had thought about that I thought about in earlier stages of writing this, I had thought about like Blake just killing him right there. But I was like, he hasn't had the time to leave the recordings. It's not the right context for what I've laid out in the prologue. So I decided to have this be a major contribution to what will happen to him. But yeah, I'm hoping. Yeah, sorry, I choked on my water a little bit. I'm hoping that I gave at least one of my readers out there an "oh my goodness, did they just kill him" moment.
Nice.
But yeah, so that was horrifying for a number of reasons for his teammates.
Yeah. So we have like a total freak out.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, because
they've been up until this point, they've been handling it pretty professionally, but all of a sudden, he gets stabbed, and it kind of it dissolves into chaos, and then you see, oh wow, they're still kids. Yeah. It's like there's always that sense of like something can happen, like something bad can happen, but until it actually comes and is in your face and happens, you don't really know how you're gonna handle it. So I kind of wanted to give them a taste of that here. Yeah. So we kind of move into triage after this.
Yeah, didn't even cover the Bakugo and Deku versus 9 thing because that played out how it would have originally. And yeah, so we just switched to the triage. You know, Kurai's in pretty bad. He'll pull through, as far as they know, but he's in bad shape. You know, I had to do a lot. I had to do some research. I'm like, okay, like if someone's like impaled like that, what's like, is it better to try and move them to a hospital, or is it better to just try and like fix it there? And I realized, you know, this is basically he's basically in a combat zone. And, you know, combat medics, when they come, like, they have to just basically keep them alive long enough to get them to a hospital. That's kind of what they had to... They kind of do a mix of both here. Because they don't have a hospital to take him to.
Yeah.
So there was... Yeah, I wanted it to be kind of a fine line that they walk there. But as far as they know, he's going to pull through. You know, he wakes up, he's in pain. But, you know, he's kind of like... He's already trying to make people around him feel better. He's like... He doesn't want them to worry about him. He's like, yeah, this sucks. It's not as bad as the last time this happened to me, but
yeah. So it's a stark contrast to the last time he was in the hospital.
Yeah, for a life-threatening situation. Because he was in the hospital for the Nomu fight, but that wasn't for him. Like, his life wasn't in danger. He just needed to be patched up.
No, this time he's like, same old. I didn't lose a limb. We're good.
Yeah, not quite that way. He does say, he's like, yeah, this sucks, but at the same time, he's like not letting it keep him down. Because he's like, where he's at, he's like, that's not gonna help anybody if I, you know, he's like, oh no, I got stabbed. It's like, I've been impaled. I've been impaled. Yeah, they still have a job to do. I kind of love the continued little interaction where it's just like, you're not gonna fight. I can strategize. You're not gonna fight. I can strategize. You're not gonna fight. I'm not gonna fight. Yeah, I'll believe that when I see it.
Yeah.
Because Mina knows, she's like, he's gonna try and fight as soon as he has a chance to do it.
Then he's able to kind of reconcile with the kid too, though, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, that was a nice. I did want there to be like a genuine like reconciliation scene between the two of them, like after what had gone down, and I felt like this was the best timing to do it.
Yeah.
We also Blake's freak out in the bathroom. Honestly, what I would have to say was inspired by. Spoilers for Naruto Shippuden. Who anybody who hasn't seen or seen the show or read the manga, but after Kakashi killed Rin, you know, he kept having nightmares. He kept waking up, and he kept like, you could see like he was scrubbing his hands raw because like he just like he said he could still smell it. And like he could still see it. Like he couldn't get no matter what he did, he couldn't get it off of him.
Yeah.
So like that kind of reminded me of that scene. Because we come to find out here, you know, like I've kind of hinted at it here and there, but Blake cares very much for Kurai at this point. So for her to be the one that did that to him is just eating her up. Especially since she thinks, you know, like I did this to him. She's like, I did this to him before too. She's like almost starting taking this mentality of like, I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be around him. I'm only going to bring pain and suffering to these people. I'm only going to bring pain and suffering to him. But I also wanted to nip that in the bud. So Kurai doesn't know that she has feelings for him at this point, but he does understand that he can understand she's beating herself up. He's seen himself do it. You know, at one point he was like ripping chunks out of his arm because he was trying to give himself something else to think about other than the pain that his mind was recreating for him. He was basically destroying himself. He doesn't want to see her go through that too. So, you know, first chance he gets, he reaches out. He's trying to help her. And I thought that was a good moment to have between the two of them.
Yeah, definitely.
And like I think this is the first time I've written a story where there's like an unrequited love interest. And like, so I guess I'm, as much as I'm using this opportunity to try my hand at it, it made sense to me that this would be the way that things unfolded.
Okay. Well, they've been through a lot of really
exactly
life-threatening, high-stress situations together, and that's the kind of thing that tends to draw people together and cause these feelings to start being a thing.
Yeah. But I also did like I'm not gonna do like a love triangle thing. Like I hate love triangles. I don't like those. So probably seems a little weird that I say that as I'm writing an unrequited love kind of thing happening, but I'm not gonna make a soap out of this.
Okay. Nice. Yeah. So that kind of brings us to the strategy meeting.
Yeah, we get, which doesn't play out too differently, except in the instance where Katsuma kind of turns to both Deku and Kurai, and he's like, because they're already in the room. And the original Katsuma's like, you should give me over to the villains, and the other heroes are like, no, we shouldn't do that. And he's like, but if you do, then everybody else will be safe. And then Deku and Bakugo come in. In this version, they're all in the room together already. So he turns to Deku and Kurai, the people that he thinks of as the heroes in the room. And he's like, this is what I should... Because he's like looking to them for confirmation. He's like, this is what I should do, right? So like nobody else gets hurt. And Kurai's like, that. He's like, technically that's a possibility, but shouldn't do that.
We don't...
It's like, we don't negotiate with terrorists.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he has to explain that in a way that a child will understand it.
Yeah.
So for those of you who are like, he's being kind of harsh with the kids on characters, here's more of the Kurai that's like, he's being gentle with the kids. He's like trying to empathize with them and understand why they do things and explain things in a way that they will understand it. I think I did all right with that.
I genuinely didn't hear the second part of the chapter this evening, and I know you read it to me the other day. I'm just out of it, so forgive me for not remembering.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, I really enjoyed writing the scene where Mahiro comes up to him and is like, hey, I'm sorry I did what I did the other day. And Kurta's like, I get it. You were worried that we wouldn't protect your brother if you needed him to. She's like, how do you know that? He's like, well, I know a thing or two about little brothers. So he ends up talking to her about Akaduri and about how Akaduri saved his life. And Mahiro's like, wait, your brother saved you? How does that work? So he goes on, he talks to her. He's like, our little brothers are he's like, they can be a lot more amazing than we give credit for. But they become even more amazing if, we as their family love them and help them and support them in their chosen path. So they had that. So like they kind of have that talk, which I really, really enjoyed writing.
Good.
I really hope that everybody else like enjoys it as much as I enjoyed writing it.
Yeah.
Because like Mahiro got on my nerves quite a bit in the movie, but like by the end of it, she'd won me around, and I also felt like there was potential for more to be explored there.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But you know how it goes. The meeting, they decided like, all right, you know what? We don't really have any options other than to fight these guys. So let's get ourselves ready. And then we have Kurai sitting by himself, realizing that if there's even the smallest chance that this goes south for... I keep choking on my water. Sorry. If there's even the smallest chance that this ends badly for him, he doesn't want to be like his dad, in the sense that his dad just left that, like he didn't leave any explanations except for a piece of paper that led them on that led them on a breadcrumb trail. But yeah, he wants to. He wants to leave behind some real answers for the people that care about him. Yeah. Which leads him to where we are now. He's making his recording. He's preparing the files. So he's not, just for clarification, he's not going to sit there and narrate the entirety of Your Hero Academia in the brief time that he has before they have to get up and go to the mountains and set up their traps. He has been I've mentioned this a few times in the story. He's been doing a diary. He's been like recording stuff that's been happening to him and like his perspective on it. Those are the files that he is sending to his brother and to Detective Tsukuuchi. Gotcha. And he keeps, so like he has a copy of them in his scouter so that he can read them.
And tell me why the detective needs, because what information does he have for him that he doesn't already have?
He knows that Detective Tsukuuchi is in charge of any cases that happen to tie in with the League of Villains. So if there's a chance that this group of villains is part of the League of Villains, he needs to have all the relevant data on it so that he can pursue any leads that these villains might lead them to.
Gotcha. Okay.
So he's just trying, like, police have to work with a lot of limited information in their field of work. He's trying to see to it that Tsukuchi and the police force have as much information as they can have available to them.
Gotcha.
So like he's sending it to his brother first, who will filter it as necessary and will pass on the relevant information. But he's also leaving it for his brother to like help him understand like this is why I had to do it, man.
Yeah.
So so he's preparing these notes and these messages for multiple reasons.
Okay.
But
nice.
yeah, we have after 75 podcasts, we have come full circle to the prologue. Like I said, you bloodthirsty little gremlins wanted it. You're about to get it.
They hung in there, man.
They have hung in there. I'm very impressed.
All right. Well, that's about it.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for listening into the chapter and sticking with us this long. The next chapter is going to be even longer than this one was.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah. So get ready for get ready for that one.
Insert a psyche. Oh wow. All
All
right.
right,
Have
guys.
a good one.
I hope you guys have a plus ultra rest of your January. We'll see you in a couple weeks.